And that's why you're here, because a lot of the people that listen to the podcast, or people that actually are lost, they have so much fear of change that they rather keep on suffering in their current position or their current job or their current business. And they don't take that leap of faith that takes them to the next level because they are so afraid of the unknown that they rather suffer. The problem with that is that the lifespan of a human is very short. And every day that you are miserable, you will never get that day back. Welcome to the Break Fit podcast. I am your host, David Mancilla. Happy to be at service. Today we have with us Mr. Daniel Clarke. Brother, welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. Thanks for having me. Very much appreciated.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much for dedicating your time to bless the world unconditionally. Daniel, as you know, this podcast is called Break Free, and it's because we create jails by having limiting beliefs in our lives. We think we're trapped, and sometimes we create our own traps. So this show is about interviewing people like you that have realized that they could actually break free from their own life and live a life of abundance and live a life at your own terms, within your own terms. So welcome, brother. Can you tell me your full name, where do you live, and what do you do for a living?
Yeah, sure. Full name. First name, Daniel, Matthew and Graham. I have two middle names, and the surname is Clarke. I believe my parents couldn't decide on some choices they had, so they opted for the two middle names as opposed to the usual one. I live in Muskoka in not northern, but 2-ish hours north of Toronto in Ontario. As you can probably tell, I don't sound like a Canadian, or at least that I'm originally from Ontario. So I'm actually born and raised in Australia and moved here about 19 years ago. And I currently work as a financial advisor. I'm fairly early into building that business, about 18 months to 2 years into that process. Prior to that, I was 20 years in the hospitality industry and owned and operated numerous businesses over the years.
And that's why you're here, because a lot of the people that listen to the podcast, or people that actually are lost, they have so much fear of change that they rather keep on suffering in their current position or their current job or their current business. And they don't take that leap of faith that takes them to the next level because they are so afraid of the unknown that they rather suffer. The problem with that is that the lifespan of a human is very short. And every day that you are miserable, you will never get that day back. So after working for 20 years in different industries, you took the leap of faith, and now you're in a new version of your life, which is fabulous. So let's go back in time, brother. Where do you go to university? You said you're from Australia. How old were you when you came to Canada?
I was 24, 25 when I moved to Canada, so 2004. And I did my education in Australia. So I have a Bachelor of Science degree in kinesiology, or exercise science, as we called it back in Australia. And then I completed a master's degree also in science, and that was a specialization in occupational health and safety.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So I completed that in 2002, 2003, and then worked briefly in that field. I worked on a very large civil construction project in Sydney, in the Central Business District, and I worked in health and safety for about 6 months before I moved to Canada.
So, what got you into the health sciences? What was in your mind when you were a teenager, when you were about to decide where to go?
I was very, very athletically focused as a teenager. I played a lot of football, or soccer, as we can call it in North America, but so played a lot of football, played a lot of cricket, which you may or may not be familiar with, but very big in Australia. So yeah, I was really focused on my athletic pursuits, and I actually had originally applied to university with the thought of doing computer sciences, and then ended up changing it to exercise science. So they were both a science base, but I changed my major, I guess, or my focus from before I even started from computer science to exercise science. And the thinking there was mainly just around, I really didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I had a real passion and love of sports and athletic pursuits. And so exercise science was, geared around human movement and understanding the body better. So that was my starting point.
Beautiful. To the point that you actually made a master. So you were really into it.
So then the realization partway through my degree was that there wasn't a lot of job opportunities with a kinesiology or an exercise science degree back in the early 2000s. There's only so many professional sports teams in Australia. I didn't really want to become a personal trainer. And so, the job opportunities were somewhat limited. And so there was a big movement in corporate Australia for health and safety positions, especially in certain industries that were, high risk jobs, mining and construction. So this health and safety program was developed by the University of Wollongong, where I completed my degree and my master's. And so I did the 18-month course in occupational health and safety, really because the job opportunities were really strong in that field back in the mid or the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm. Now, usually people leave from Canada to Australia because Australia is like Canada without the winter.
Sure.
What made you do it backwards?
Yeah, it was a relationship that I was in at the time where a former partner or former girlfriend was from Canada. So that's what originally drew me over. It certainly wasn't the weather, although you're right in that the people are very similar in terms of just culturally the fit was there. And I had traveled previously, so I sort of was very open to traveling, and so took the opportunity to move over and really didn't career wise health and safety I'd sort of realized wasn't where my heart really was and where I was finding a lot of inspiration. So I sort of defaulted back to an industry that I was familiar with, and that's how I sort of wound up back in hospitality again when I moved here.
That's wonderful. Did you have a hard time finding a job here?
I did actually. Yeah, it was quite a challenge, especially as I originally sought work in the health and safety field. Being, I was only on a 1-year work visa at the time. So, there wasn't a lot of opportunities. I think they were limited because of the 1-year work visa. And, that type of career path isn't, there wasn't a lot of sort of short-term jobs in that field. It was more long-term commitments people were looking for, and not having been here for very long, nor having a work visa that allowed me to work beyond 12 months, I think limited my opportunities. So really from a desire just to get working again, I picked up a job in hospitality, and even that in itself was difficult. And that just came through personal contacts and relationships that I'd built. But when I got that opportunity, where I sort of landed or started was there was a pretty clear path to some good opportunities in terms of becoming a manager and maybe having my own business at some point, and that was really what drove me to sort of fully commit to that industry. I'd always liked the industry and met a lot of great people, but back in Australia I didn't really see it as a career path, but in Canada it seemed like there was some good opportunities. So I sort of committed myself to the job I was in and to the industry, and within a few short years, those opportunities started to come to fruition.
How do you move from being an employee to having your own business? How long did that take, and what was the process in your mindset to take the jump? Because this is one of the most important things that people need to figure out. It took me 10 years. So I started my first business, I failed, I went to the corporate world, and it took me 10 years to convince myself that I was ready to try again. And it was very hard. It wasn't easy. How was that process for you?
And at the time, I didn't recognize it, but really it was a shift in mindset first and foremost. I'd always seen the industry of hospitality as being a transient one, and one that I wasn't really committed to long term. But this opportunity and the opportunities that I saw for the short to medium and long term, really opened my mind to committing to the industry. And at that point, once I'd committed to being the best or doing, putting the work into becoming the best that I could be in that field, then I started to learn more about operations, learn more about things that I didn't have the knowledge in, understanding the world of wine and the spirit side of things and hospitality, customer service. So it was just a matter of, once I'd shifted my mindset and opened it for this to be a career path for me, I really just sort of started to kind of took that scientific approach. What do I need to do and what do I need to learn to become the best version of myself for this industry and this job, and really start to focus on learning, and just every day came in and tried to improve in one facet or another of that industry and of my job. And I'd always sort of had leadership roles within sporting teams and within other previous jobs. And so becoming a manager was a very, the first step that had kind of happened fairly quickly. And then really just my desire to want to get into ownership was what kind of drove the people that I worked for to present those opportunities.
So you were giving an opportunity by a current owner to start your own ownership role.
Yeah, path to take on a small equity, in one of the businesses, and then further opportunities grew from there, larger equities and larger share of businesses, and then eventually, my last business was one that I owned myself for about 5 years. So it was just progression, right? And I think that comes when you have an end goal or a path, and it's really just step by step by step, right? When you think about that end goal, it seems so far away, but it's just one step at a time. And what can I do today that's going to help me tomorrow and beyond? And you start to break it down into smaller tasks, becomes a bit more achievable and a bit more manageable. And then you just get to work every day, one step at a time, right?
There is so much wisdom in that, because especially when you have a long-term goal, you say, okay, I want to become an owner, an entrepreneur. You have to realize that every day counts, and you have to have enough level of consciousness to say, I'm going to do a tiny step today that's going to get me closer to my goal. Every time when I wake up in the morning, this is what I ask myself. Why am I here? What do I want out of life? And then what am I going to do about it today? Because we think it's far away, right? The goal is far away, but you don't know how fast every day counts, and it's those daily habits that really gets you to your end goal, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the process that's the important part, right? It's the commitment to the process, and that just, trying to make those micro improvements every day. And my mindset very early on in hospitality was just, how do I come in every day and do the work that I have to do a bit more efficient tomorrow? How do I save myself 5-10 minutes of time tomorrow or today that I can then use in some other way to improve myself in a month from now? Once I've carved out an hour for myself every week, how do I then use that hour to learn about wine, or learn about management, or learn about the back end of things on the accounting side of things, right? So how can I become more efficient in the mundane stuff, the things that just have to get done for whatever job it is, to then carve out time for myself to learn something new and advance myself in a different area? That was my mindset very early on, and still holds true for today. There are just different tasks or different processes that I'm trying to get more efficient in, and different things I'm trying to learn more about.
But the fundamentals is the same though, right?
Absolutely.
Whether you're a pro athlete, or you want to make a business of whatever it is, right? Or you want to write a book, everything is that daily grindy process. And you know what I come to realize after 50 years in this planet is that the actual the joy is in the process. The fun is in the process. Once you achieve your goal, what you're going to do is get yourself another goal. So we are like, a lot of the mistakes that I've done in my life is I was waiting for my happiness until I reach my goal. Now I know that it's no. I'm going to be happy today, making progress, because once I reach my goal, I'm going to have another goal, because that's what humankind is about, right? Like, we are always trying to achieve more.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, really interesting point. And it reminds me of, and I'm failing to remember the book that it is. I think it's a habit building book, but it talks about, and I think a lot of what we're talking about right now is about mindset and shifting of mindset, because I think that's the starting point for any sort of meaningful change. But if you think, when you work towards a goal and you hear people talk about, 30-day plan to do this, or I'm training to run 5 kilometers, or I'm training to, and I use sporting analogies or health because they come naturally to me, but I want to lose 10 kilograms for my wedding, or 20 pounds for my wedding, or whatever it is. The thing is, once you hit that goal, there's then to be able to continue with the habits that you've built to achieve that goal, you then have to set the next goal. Whereas if the mindset is I'm an athlete, or I'm a runner, or I want to be fit and healthy to be at my best for my partner or for my kids, you're not necessarily then having to reset and change your goals every 6 months or a year. It's this lifelong journey of pursuit where you're always looking to improve as a runner, as a partner, as a parent, right? So those goal-based things are really good, but also if you can shift it to more of a long-term journey, then I think that's where you can also get some really great long-term benefits to changes that we make to our habits.
Yeah, one of the greatest books that I read about that is Atomic Habits.
That's the book I was thinking of, yeah.
I think it's the same, right? Yeah, I've read about 5 books in habits and how the brain psychology works, because it's also about how do you actually manage your brain to do whatever you want to do, because the brain is going to try to save energy. Brain is here to keep us alive as long as possible. The problem with that is that it's waiting for the famine, it's waiting for the time that you gotta go hunting, and that doesn't happen anymore. So how do you actually use your brain in a way that it removes the obstacle of creating those habits, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Automate those habits in a way, right? Like remove any obstacles, the path of least resistance, make it easy for yourself to create those habits. Yeah, it's a great book.
How did you come to realization that you were done with the hospitality industry and you want to find another career? And how do you find financial advising? It's very different than what you used to do, right?
Yeah, really good question. Part of the process of change started when my daughter was born. So my daughter is 4, just over 4 now. Yeah, thank you. And that's a great, having a child is a great way to put things into perspective and show you how quickly life does go by. But really, that was the big sort of catalyst for some change. And, my wife and I used to do a check-in every year to see, how the business was performing and see if we were going to keep committing to the journey, right? And, as a small business owner, there's a lot of challenges, right? And so our lives were changing. The hospitality industry is very challenging, like many industries. Obviously, it's a big commitment of time, and often late nights and weekends. And so it wasn't working on a family level. It wasn't working on a business level. We'd given a lot over the 5-ish years that it was open, and financially, it wasn't, giving the sort of returns that we were hoping for or that we would have liked. And then when I reflected on my time in hospitality, and I don't regret any of the 20 years I spent in hospitality, but I feel like I, in a way, took the path of least resistance to some degree, even though I worked really, really hard to achieve what I achieved. I feel like there was a bigger challenge that I could take on that would be more rewarding in the future. And when I started to learn more about what financial advising was all about and the industry itself, there was a lot of learning that went on before I found the right place for me to be, in terms of like the company that I wanted to work with or the group that I wanted to be a part of. But really, when I started to look at what the industry was all about, there had a lot of similarities to hospitality, and that at the end of the day, it's about relationship building and your interpersonal skills, and being able to help someone realize what it is that they're trying to achieve, just focused on a financial standpoint, right? And I work primarily with business owners and entrepreneurs And, I help them move from the what if to the what is, right? So how are you getting the most out of your business? You have some really unique opportunities as a business owner to maximize your wealth. And are you currently doing that? And how can I work with you and your family or your employees to be able to help you achieve that? So very rewarding. And it sounds very different on the surface, but a lot of similarities in that, it's really engaging with people and learning about them and where they're at today and where they're trying to move to tomorrow or 5, 10, 20 years from now, and sometimes beyond that.
And you come from an excellent background because you were a former business owner, so you know exactly what your clients are looking for because you're focusing on business owners, right?
Yeah, and I think that's where 12 years of being a shareholder in privately owned companies or fully owning a business myself as the only shareholder. There's a lot of practical on the ground experience and knowledge that I learned before I even started to become a financial advisor, right? And so some of those pitfalls that are out there, some of those strategies that are available to business owners that are not they're not commonly known, but they're not secrets, and they're certainly not in contravention to any laws or tax acts. They're just understanding the system and how it works, and what advantages do you have as a business owner that an individual who works for salaries does not have available to them. So it's I never understood or was educated around what opportunities I had as a business owner, and so I really want to help present those ideas and those strategies to business owners, because I think that entrepreneurs are the backbone of the economy, and when you take on that kind of risk and you put yourself out there, not only financially but emotionally and personally, you deserve to be rewarded as much as possible, right? And so I want to be able to help people do that.
You touch a great point, and I love democracy, right? And I love social capitalism. And when you look at the systems in the world, God, please, let's not depend on the government, right? Sure. The government is there to set the rules and to make sure everybody's playing fair, but it's ownership, the right to prosper and grow, and also the right to help other people is what makes a country successful, right? Like Canada is a great example of that, despite all the problems that we've been having, because I think the government might be getting too big, but this is a perfect balanced country. So is Australia, I think, right? But the core, the machine, is entrepreneurship. And me as being in that role for many, many years now, I realized that the wealth and the stability of a civilization is based on having freedom to pursue the right of becoming better, getting more, and also sharing it with everybody else, right? So it's so important. So thank you. Thank you for advising owners to grow their wealth, because the more people grow, the more they have to give, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Oh, most definitely. Yeah. Well, if the point of having and growing and obtaining more is to share and give back, in my opinion, right? And I think entrepreneurs, as a general rule, I mean, they're starting a business to benefit themselves financially, but they're providing for others, right? I'm sure you employ hundreds of people, but the small business owner that employs 5 or 20 people, you're providing a living and an opportunities for families to provide jobs that are outside of the the large corporate entities that where you can often feel like just a small piece in a very big puzzle or a very big machine. And so I think rewarding that entrepreneurship and people's pursuit of their endeavors and their passions is really important part of the economy, for sure.
Yeah, another great point. I think the size of the health of a country is the size of the middle class, right? So the more medium and sized businesses that we have in a country, the better the entire population is. I don't have anything against large corporations, but when a corporation becomes too large, it almost becomes almost like a government, right? And then you have a lot of waste, you have a lot of crazy rules that they need, because to move a mammoth, you need to move it very slow. You cannot move fast. You lose your agility, right? And then you have people just doing the rat race, right? The hamster wheel. So that's another thing that I love about our countries, right? Is this mostly based on middle class, middle-sized companies, which is fabulous for me. Small and middle class, right? Small and middle size, I mean. Let's switch gears for a little bit. I have noticed that most of my growth has come from deep problems. The bigger the problem, the bigger the success after I resolve it. So can you give me an example, personal or in business, of a problem that was very hard to face, but how do you overcome it and what do you learn from it?
Yeah, I think that another great question, by the way. And, I think back to my time in hospitality, and a lot of my mindset or way of thinking was, we're always going to have those moments where perhaps business client engagements, service calls, whatever field you're in, don't go the way we would like. And you perhaps have a client or customer who's not satisfied with their product or the service or their experience, your business. Those things are going to happen. It's just human nature, right? And I think every one of those opportunities that gets presented to you is a chance to do exactly that: learn, grow. And I think those opportunities, those growth opportunities, come from when we've erred or made mistakes. And the first step is recognizing the error and putting your hand up and accepting responsibility for that, but then doing the right thing by your client, customer, vendor, whatever the relationship is, acknowledging and then committing to improving and ensuring that it doesn't happen again. So I can think of times when customer didn't have a great experience in a restaurant, meal was not up to standard, quality was down, it was cold, it took too long, whatever the reason. I can think of a few specifically, but just doing right by the guests, right? And if that meant that the guest didn't pay for their meal that evening, or it was heavily compensated, then so be it. But some of the best relationships that I created with former customers were for those kinds of experiences, because it's just, you're at that point, it's just about human to human. You're not thinking about the bottom line. You're just like, what do I got to do to make this right? The cost is really not that important to me at this point. I just have to make this customer want to come back and want to bring someone else to say, hey, this restaurant didn't do the right thing by me, but they fixed it. They did right by me. I want to give them another chance, and let's go and spend some money there again, right? So sometimes it's just about person to person. Let's fix this problem. I made the mistake and I want to do right by you. And that's all it is.
One of the last full-time jobs that I had, my boss, which was one of my biggest mentors, told me one thing: the biggest crises create the best heroes. And he told me this because by accident I was managing a large database system for a company that was Canada-wide, and by mistake one of my engineers deleted a table in the database that shut the entire company down. So everybody was panicking. We thought we were going to get, laid off or, fired. I go to my boss, which was the VP, and he says, David, this is a great opportunity for you guys to become heroes. Figure it out, fix it. I'll bring you food. I bring you whatever you need, but you don't leave this place until it's corrected. And we worked all night. But at about 6 a.m. the next day, everything was restored. Everybody was happy, and we got a congratulations. Instead of actually, instead of getting kicked out of the business, we were the heroes by a problem that we created ourselves, but we owned it.
Yeah.
We apologized right away, and then we started to figure out ways to how to correct it, right?
Yeah. Great story.
Incredible, eh? Brother, why Muskoka? I know where Muskoka is, but I don't think most of our listeners know what Muskoka is. For me, it's heaven on earth. It's one of the best places in the world. But can you describe why do you live there and what do you like most about Muskoka?
Yeah, so I mean, it's cottage country, right, for a lot of Torontonians or people that are in cities within a few hours of Muskoka. Been a lot of families have had cottages up here for generations. A lot of lakes, a lot of big homes, a lot of not so big homes, a lot of the full spectrum of cottages. Um, we were fortunate enough about a year ago to have an opportunity to move out of the city. My wife and daughter and I have been living in Toronto prior to that for the last, I've been there basically for the last 20 odd years or 18 years. But it was, with the uncertainty of COVID about 12 months ago and the prospect of not, being able to get outdoors into nature with my family, my wife and I decided to take an opportunity to spend a year or so up here. And it's given my daughter a chance to spend a lot of time in nature when we thought that opportunity was going to be somewhat limited. There was a period of time where the city of Toronto was sort of shutting down parks and whatnot and encouraging people to stay indoors. And we wanted to be obviously as outdoors as much as we can. And so that was just through a connection, through a friend who had a house available. We were, very fortunate enough to be able to come up here, and we're on 500 acres of wilderness and
Wow.
it's sort of farming land, fairly close to a lake. We're not on the water, but it's been great. My daughter's seen all sorts of animals, and it's become sort of a daily occurrence, all the birds and deer and bears and so, you just can't put a dollar value on that, and you can't, there's the learning curve for a 3 and 4-year-old to see nature like that. So up close and personal is, it's very fortunate. So.
Isn't that one of the silver linings from all this crazy pandemic? A lot of people like you have found heaven on earth by just moving out of the city, and now with the internet and now with the paradigm shift that companies made, allowing people to work from home now permanently.
Yeah.
The world is changing, so we're going to have less traffic, we're going to do less pollution, we're going to have the opportunity to living back in nature again. It's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, I really hope that that's something that we can take away from all this, is that more people are focused on creating balance for themselves and spending more time outside with, their loved ones, family, friends, in nature, because we can learn so many valuable lessons from observing what happens in the natural world. And so hopefully that's the one big takeaway that we can all sort of, look back on and see that sort of fork in the road that sent them down that path for sure.
Beautiful. Brother, thank you so much for your time. I don't want to abuse it. One last question before we finish our amazing conversation. And I love this question. I love it. So if you had access to a billboard in the busiest highway on earth, what will you write in it?
I listen to the Tim Ferriss podcast a lot, so I'm not sure if you got the idea from him, but it is a good question. And I have a few, I've never really thought about what my answer would be, but I have a few Post-it notes on my wall, and I keep them there as just kind of reminders from when I'm engaged with clients or potential clients. And there's 2 words. I don't know if I should use both of them or just the one. I think maybe the one would be more succinct. And and the word is simply listen.
Listen. Profound. What a simple word. I started my meditation practice in 2013. I couldn't even do 4 minutes. Now I'm up to an hour a day. And the whole thing is about listening and looking inside. So I look inside myself and I just listen. Have that quiet time between thoughts, right? Where you just listen. And that's where you find happiness, by the way. It's beautiful. That's wonderful. Brother, if people would like to learn more about your financial advisory services or get in contact with you, how will they do that?
Yeah, the best place would be LinkedIn. LinkedIn would be the best place to find me. And you just type in Daniel Clarke. I'm part of the Farber Wealth team or Farber Group, and that would be the easiest way to find me.
Brother, thank you so much for your time. I truly appreciate it on behalf of my audience and myself. You have transformed me in a better way. I am better because of you after this interview. So thank you so much. Appreciate it. And
Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. And what a great idea and a great way to learn more about other entrepreneurs. So thank you very much for hosting.
Oh, my pleasure. Have a wonderful week. Blessings.
That's all for today's episode of the Break Free Podcast. Head on over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. Starting your own business can be tough, but it doesn't have to be. Visit davidmansilla.com to pick up a copy of the #1 international best-selling book, Breaking Out of Corporate Jail. Expand what you consider to be possible and reach your full potential. And join us on the next episode.